Hello, everybody. We are on to chapter 13 of the Rhino in Right Field. Let's go. Chapter 13. There we sat, cross-legged, on the floor of Ace's bedroom, staring at my blank entry form. He said no? I told you he'd say no, but hollering didn't make me feel any better, and being right didn't make me feel any better either. Ace still couldn't believe it. But we gave Joe Daggett the idea. I shook my head. All we told him was that it'd be swell to wear a pup's uniform. That's not the same thing as having a whole contest. Okay, so it was Joe Daggett's idea. But your pops likes Joe Daggett. He's with this Joe Daggett. Ace held up 2 crossed fingers. Joe Daggett asked my pop to shine his shoes, not to be his best friend, I sighed. Now what am I going to do? Like I said before, said Ace, tell your folks there's a field trip on Saturday. Like I said before, that's a dumb idea. They'll never buy that in a million years. Ace opened his mouth to say something else, but then he frowned and cocked his head. Hear that? I held still for a few seconds listening, and then I heard it too, a clink at the bedroom window. Then another one, a little louder. Clink! He went over and rolled up the window shade. Down on the sidewalk, someone was winding up to toss another pebble. It's Pete, grumbled Ace, and Chuck and Charlie and the whole sorry bunch of them. He slid the window up and leaned out. What do you knuckleheads want? Pete sneered up at us. The rest of the fellows hovered around him like flies on a pile of rhino dung. I should have figured you'd be up there. You're just the 2 losers I want to see. Pete reached into his pocket of his bomber jacket and pulled out a scrap piece of paper. My entry form is all filled out, he called, waving in the air. If you know what's good for you, you won't even bother. Or I'll crush you both like the slimy little snails you are, and I don't mean on the ball field either. The other fellas snorted and nodded. They're not bad eggs on their own, but for some reason, whenever Pete's around, they all turn into drooling idiots. Like now. Is that what you came here for? Hollered Ace. Well, you're wasting your time, 'cause not only are we going to enter, but we're going to whip your knuckle-headed noggin all the way to Lake Michigan. I couldn't top that, so I didn't say anything. Pete kept going. What makes you think you'd catch a fly ball in that contest, even without Tank breathing down your neck? You're the saddest excuse for an outfielder I ever saw. Heck, even Ace here would do better than you. And then, of course, Ace would stink it up at the plate. The only reason he ever gets on base is because his strike zone is so small. The drooling idiots snorted and snickered again. Now I was mad. Mostly because Pete was saying stuff like that in front of everyone, but also because a lot of what he said was true. You got a lot of nerve coming around here making threats, Pete, I hollered. And then, almost before I realized what my own mouth was doing, I hollered something else at him. But this time, I hollered it in Greek. Pete stopped in mid-brag. It was hard to tell for sure because the street lamps weren't very bright, but I could have swore his face went pale. And then he said something back at me in Greek. It was just one word, but trust me when I say I can't write it down in any language. Everyone else stood there, staring. First at me, and then at Pete, and then at me again. But I wasn't going to explain what I said, and I dang knew Pete wouldn't either. Come on, fellas, he muttered, glaring at me out of the corner of his eye. We got better things to do. And they all slunk off into the night like the weasels they were. Ace was staring at me too. Finally, he said, Well, what did you tell him? I slid the window closed. Nothing. I called him a name. And before Ace could even ask me any more questions, I changed the subject. That knucklehead probably forged his ma's signature. Ace cocked an eyebrow at me. You think so? I shrugged. It's just that one time he told me that's what he does. Ace stared at me, and I could practically see the gears turning inside his thick noggin. You don't suppose... Forget it, I said. I'm not stooping to Pete's level. He didn't say anything. For someone with a motor mouth, he couldn't even be more annoying when he was quiet. What would a fake signature do anyways? I said. It won't spring me from work next Saturday. Ace bit off a hangnail and spat it out. Why can't your uncle work for you for one day? He can't claim to go to school on Saturdays, can he? I shook my head. He won't step foot in that shop. I think if he ever does, he knows he's doomed. Ace inspected his fingernails. In that case, I got 2 words for you. Field trip. I told you already they'd never buy it. Then it hit me. Joe Daggett. What about him? Remember when he said what he said the day we met him? He said his door is always open? Yeah? So? So what if tomorrow after school we go down to the old orchard and visit Joe Daggett? I can remind him of how I work my pop's shop on Saturdays, and maybe he'll let me try out on Friday after school or Saturday after we close up shop. And then Pop will sign the permission slip too. It's worth a try, said Ace. But what makes you think Joe Daggett would bend the rules just for you? Don't you remember? I held up 2 crossed fingers. Me and Joe Daggett were like this. Chapter 14. The next day after school, me and Ace took the same route as we had the day before, avoiding the zoo and the ball field. We had some important things to do that day. Where are we going? Said Ace, when I kept going past the streetcar shop. I thought you wanted to go to the orchard to see Joe Daggett. The streetcar will take too long, I said. Follow me. A few minutes later, we banged through my front door. It's me, Ma, I yelled towards the kitchen. I took the stairs 2 at a time, with Ace following. At the top of the stairs, the bathroom door was shut. On the other side, somebody was whistling. In the mood, I knocked. Uncle Spyro? The whistling stopped. The door opened a few inches, and Spyro poked his head out through a cloud of steam. Hiya, Squirts, he said, rubbing his wet hair with a towel. What's all the hubbub? We need a ride, I said. Now. Is that so? Said Uncle Spyro. Got a hot date? He winked. Gotta get to Orchard Field, said Ace. Spyro stopped rubbing his head. Orchard Field? There's no game today, is there? We gotta talk to someone in the front office. Spyro cocked an eyebrow. So take the streetcar. It'll take too long, I told him. The office might close before we get there. Please? Ace piped up. There's a contest, he said. We're going to show that Pete a thing or two. Ain't that right, Nick? He shadow-boxed the puffs of steam. Spyro squinted us. Pete Costas? From over on Cherry Street? Ace and I both nodded. Spyro disappeared behind the bathroom door for a second and then reappeared in his bathrobe. Sorry, kiddies, he said as he lathered his face in the mirror. I'm sure Pete deserves whatever you want him to do, but I can't help you right now. I gotta get to school. He scraped the razor across his cheek. I was ready for this. It was the card I didn't really want to play, but I didn't have much choice. You don't want me to tell Pop that you don't actually go to school, do you? Spyro's mouth dropped open. We'll be waiting in the car. We bolted downstairs before he could say anything. Nicky, called Ma from the kitchen. You want a snack? Not now, Ma. Uncle Spyro's going to take us downtown. I paced the hallway. A snack sounds good, said Ace. Later. A minute later, Spyro came rattling down the stairs, putting on his shirt. Let's go, back door. He swept past us, trailing the scents of Barbasol and licorice gum. Ew, he smelled like licorice gum. Ugh. We hustled after him, through the kitchen and out the back door, leaving Ma to call after us. Why don't you go out with wet hair, Spyro? You'll get sick. Did you take a bath? You took a bath yesterday. Once we were in the car and rolling down the alley, Spyro started. Okay, you little blackmailers. What makes you think I'm not going to school? We have our ways, see? Snarled Ace from the back seat. He'd been listening to too many detective dramas on the radio. We saw you last night, okay? I already blindsided my uncle once. The last thing I could do was be honest now. You said you were going to school, but we saw you driving in the other direction. Oh, said Spiral, but he didn't bother putting up a fight. Just don't say anything to your pop, will ya? He already bust my chops, and I don't need any more grief. He chomped his gum. I shrugged. Where do you go anyways? I won't tell. Never you mind, said Uncle Spyro, rubbing my crew cut. It's nothing shifty or anything. I just rather not say right now. Fine by me, I said. Spyro slowed to a stop at the entrance to the ballpark. Just like Chuck has said, work crews were all over the place, hammering and sanding and painting. Sure enough, Joe Daggett was really going to shake things up. How long do you need, said Uncle Spyro. 15 minutes, I told him, and Ace nodded. Tell you what, said Spyro, checking his watch. I'll run a quick errand and meet you back here in 20. Deal? Deal. We slid out onto the sidewalk and waved. How did you know it would work, said Ace, as we watched the Nash drive away. Finally, I could breathe again. I didn't. Awesome. That was a good 2 chapters. So where do we think Uncle Spyro goes? Do we think Nick is going to be able to talk to Joe Daggett and have him change the contest date for one day? What do you think? Let me know. See you next time.